good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to episode 43 of Fundraising BIDness Talk. I'm Patrick Siver. I'm the owner and lead auctioneer at G Events LLC, based here in beautiful Beaverton, Oregon. Hope everybody's getting ready for their big turkey day and the oncoming holiday season. I know we're excited and very thankful for all the opportunities that we've had in this past year to help others and the help they provided us. And it's been a crazy year, crazy 18 months, as we all like to say. We thought it was crazy before, didn't we? But it's been a lot of fun, and we've learned a lot. It's been challenging at times, but it's all good. So, hey, I want to encourage you, if you're tuning in today, just go ahead and type in that chat box and give us a reach out and say hello, and tell us where you're tuning in from today. We'd love to say hello back and catch up with you a little bit. And then also want to remind you, as we're going through the program today, if you've got a question, please type it into the comment box and let us know what your question is. We would love to answer it right here on the line, and get you started off to a successful year. So today's topic is something that I think is, something I've touched on in the past in multiple areas, multiple ways, but I don't think that I've ever really kind of addressed it head on with just a single episode of Fundraising Business Talk. So I thought I would do that today. The topic is online auction strategies for fundraising. And I want to start by identifying, a lot of us have synonymously used the term silent auction and online auction, and, just kind of interchangeable. And I they're drastically different. And let's start with setting the stage to what our traditional silent auction looked like pre-COVID. I'm talking about a silent auction that took place prior to your gathering event or your gala event. It was usually anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes long. It was in a space, probably, most likely, best practice, separate from your dining area that you were going to have your big program and your dinner and all those things. It was a very social atmosphere. It's where guests first mixed and mingled. It was also the first time that they saw your auction items. Maybe some folks had promoted a few of their items, maybe previewed their items using social media or emails or something along those lines. The other thing that's important to keep in mind here is that you were limited to the people that were in attendance, right? And some people show up early, some people show up late. So you never really had 100% of your guests that were involved. The other thing that we saw a lot of times was, you were doing paper bid sheets, and paper bid sheets are kind of, that's the way we used to do things. And but it's interesting. Bids were limited to the number of fixed lines on that bid sheet. So you could only bid as what was on the bid sheet. So if you had 10 lines, you had room for 10 bids. If you were following best practices in a silent auction, in this format, then you probably preset the bid amounts, not the increments, but the amounts, which assumes you've set the increments. But the reality is you actually set the bid amounts, and people wrote down their name at the bottom, across the line that they were willing to, or their bid number at the line that they were willing to bid that amount. The other thing that we used a lot in those days was a buy it now, which meant that someone could skip to the buy it now line and pay a fixed price for that auction item or auction package. A lot of times we used to recommend in that environment that buy it now price was at anywhere from 135 to 150% of the fair market value. And that was designed by auctioneers, by benefit auctioneers, to encourage folks to bid high, but also as a convenience to your attendees, for those attendees who were not interested in managing multiple bids throughout the room and, maybe a crowded room and trying to get from one side of the room to the other to manage their bids. And they really wanted to make sure that they got that item. They would just bid on the buy it now line, and that was the end of the auction. The other thing that we saw a lot of was the rooms were crowded, right? Many times it was difficult to get around the room. You were competing with the social atmosphere of people coming together. Maybe they hadn't seen each other in quite a while. Maybe it was also an environment, if it was like a school community or a church community, maybe they hadn't been dressed up in a while, or if there was a theme to the event, people were excited to visit and comment on each other's costumes or their attire. There was always a line at the bar, which was, challenging. And, you had to remember your bid number, and you would set your bid card down at the table you were going to be sitting at. And there was all sorts of, unique elements. But I think that as I as I talk through it, I'm reminded of that environment, and it's amazing we did it, right? And so now COVID hits, we're not gathering anymore, and all of a sudden we have an opportunity to do things differently, and we start embracing the online auction as an option for to replace our silent auction, but also to, in many cases, with our virtual events that we did 100% virtual, we were also replacing the live auction also with online bidding. And we can talk a little bit about the difference here in a while, but and it became obvious, people say, well, online bidding's been available for benefit auctions for quite some time. Absolutely. I mean, there's been many solutions out there. I mean, Octree, I think, is celebrating 10 or 11 years now of doing online auctions and for fundraisers, and there was others in the business too. And as a benefit auctioneer and talking to a bunch of nonprofits, I, heard pretty regularly from the nonprofits that they did not embrace online auctions for several reasons. First of all, they perceived that their auction guest would be staring at their mobile phones the entire time of the event. They felt it wasn't very sociable. They felt like it was more challenging. They were trying to restrict their bidders to be the same people who had bought tickets to their event. They thought that it was unfair to have someone who did not buy a ticket to their event be able to bid. There was a lot of things that were considered, negative, potentially negative about online bidding. It was very rare, even, myself. I mean, it was very rare that I would endorse it. And usually the reason it caused me to endorse it was that we had a small time frame for the social atmosphere. We had a small, window of time for the silent auction. If it was less than, 60 minutes, if it was a 45-minute social hour and silent auction, if it was a 60-minute or less, I would usually say, okay, let's consider online bidding. And then there was also the case where a lot of times the venue, it was difficult to get around the venue based on the size of the room, or it could be based on the number of items that were on display and the number of packages that were displayed, that it could be very difficult to get around the room. And so I felt like, people may not all, be as active of bidders if it's difficult to get around the room and manage the different bid sheets that they were interested in those items. So I would recommend online bidding at that point, but it was not very often. It was not very often at all. And the other thing we would do in that case is we'd encourage them to open that online bidding. If we did recommend it, we'd encourage them to open it up maybe 48 hours in advance. I had several clients that I would recommend when they send that last email to say, look forward to seeing you at the party Saturday night, or look forward to seeing you in a couple of days, that they would say, hey, and by the way, you can, preview our auction catalog, and you can start bidding on our silent auction packages, now click here type of deal. And we saw a lot of success with that. It was a very positive, and the feedback tended to be rather strong from those type of events, that people enjoyed that, right? And so now, fast forward, COVID hits. We're not gathering, and we're moving to online bidding. And I saw a lot of confusion in embracing the concept, right? Um, and so, the first thing that I did as a benefit auctioneer was I said to myself that, this is interesting. People have been doing online auctions in the commercial side of our industry for 20 plus years, right? They've been doing online bidding for personal property, for antiques and collectibles, for automobiles, for farm equipment, for liquidation sales, for real estate. Has been doing online auctions for quite some years, so quite a number of years, and this has been extremely successful. So as we moved into that environment, I said, you know what, we don't want to necessarily try to recreate what we did in a silent auction in an online auction. Why wouldn't we go ahead and take a look at the best practices of the auction industry elements or environments that have embraced and had success with online auctions for 20 years? Why wouldn't we look at their best practices and make those our best practices in the fundraising online auction industry? And so that's what we did. And so I want to touch base on a few of those things today, give you a few things to think about. Maybe you come back and you watch the program later as you're starting to set up your events for next year. But I thought that it was crucial to talk about, and something that would be really beneficial for everybody to think about. So, one of the first things that I'm going to remind you is it does not matter where you start the bidding. It's all about where you finish. And that was one of the first things that I heard from my counterparts in the traditional auction industry, commercial side of the auction industry, was that they were really adamant, Patrick, is that you've got to get people bidding. Once they start bidding, they have the pride of ownership and the fear of loss. And what that means is that they, as soon as they bid, they can imagine owning that item or that package, and that will motivate them to continue to bid, right? Because they don't want to lose it, and they're pretty excited about they might get that item. And so they every auctioneer I talked to across the country said to me the same thing. It's not where you start the bidding, it's where you finish. So, and one of the things that I also realized was, and I talked about this a second ago, was that bids are not limited to a fixed number of lines on a bid sheet. So we are not, we're not going to run out of bids, spaces for bids in an online auction. People can continue to bid as many times as they want, right? I mean, until we end the auction. And so that was something that I thought, okay, well, that's pretty cool. That's really cool. We don't need to limit the number of bids that we take on an item. When we were in the old format, we used to limit the number of bids. In an online auction, we don't have to limit the number of bids that we take. I also realized that right away that we weren't competing with a social event. Nobody was comparing what they were wearing, their costume, for a themed event in an online auction. For the most part, there is no theme. You can have a theme, but it's not like people dressed up for it. We don't have. We're not competing with lines at the bar, right? I mean, bidders can participate in an online auction, 24/7 for a week, let's say, if that's the bidding window. So, that's pretty cool that people can do that. And we find that to be, very positive. The other thing that I noticed right away was bidders can research the items and their values. You should always, I tend to agree that you should post the fair market value of the items right on whatever way you're promoting the item, whether it's a bid sheet, whether it's an online catalog. I feel pretty strongly that you need to put the true market value of something but people can research it, right? There's a lot of things that you might consider priceless if it's something that you can't necessarily go to a retailer and buy, or you can't buy outright, that you would have to know someone or something like that. Or maybe a special experience with a celebrity is not something that's readily available. If you had I use the example here in Portland, if you had dinner for four at a certain restaurant and you were going to be joined by one of the trailblazers, let's say Damian Lillard was going to sit at the dinner with you, you can't put a value on that, right? So that would qualify as priceless, because you can't just go online and say, hey, I want to have dinner with Damian Lillard. Now you can put a value on the price of the dinner, but not on the celebrity attendee value, right? So but other than that, I think if it's a Yeti cooler, if it's a trip to Paris, if it's whatever else, those types of things, you should probably mark the fair market value. And the fair market value is relative, because that was how we used to calculate our pricing and our starting bids and our buy it now lines and things of that nature. And today, folks can research those items. They can look and see what can they buy a trip for, what is airfare to a location. A lot of times we put items in our auctions today that are vacations, which we've always done. And most of the time we recommend that they don't include airfare. I feel like airfare is something pretty unique to the individual, that they maybe they want to ride up front in the first class. Maybe they have credit card miles they can use, whatever it is. So that traditionally in our packages, I don't recommend putting airfare unless it's airfare to a specific sporting event or a special event. If you've got a trip in your auction to go to the Super Bowl, well, there's going to be some price competition for airfare into that city, lodging in that city. If it's a Kentucky Derby, it's going to be difficult to fly into Louisville, that weekend, right? So in those cases, I think airfare being included is a positive. But if it's just a vacation to Mexico, I don't say I wouldn't add airfare to it. At this point, there was a little window there during COVID where airfare was bouncing around quite a bit from a price standpoint, and I thought that if you could level that out with a fixed number in your package, that made some sense. But now, as we're getting more competitive with airfare, it's not something I would include. At the end of the day, though, having that fair market value, I think, is crucial, because that's a lot of the things that we incorporate on. The other thing that I would say is one of the things that I'm pretty adamant about that we don't do anymore is include a buy it now. I don't see any reason to stop the bidding prematurely in an online auction, and I don't know why you would put a cap on the bidding, right? You're doing a fundraiser. I understand it before, right? Because we felt somebody might bid higher than what the natural competition would be, just to guarantee they got that package. And because they didn't want to have to run back and forth between bid sheets and bid, that made sense. But today, where you can manage your bids remotely and you get notified at the last minute if somebody outbids you, all those types of things, I do not see a reason in this new environment of online auctions to ever put a buy it now line. Just not something that I would recommend. And then the other thing I would talk about is what is that bidding window? You heard me say earlier today that when we did recommend online bidding to our clients, that we talked about maybe open it up 48 hours in advance. And that's a nice situation. Now going to looking at what we hear from our counterparts in the online auction industry on the other side of the industry, I keep hearing a minimum of a week. if your event, you'd really want to make sure you cover at least one weekend, if maybe not 2 weekends, because people do things on their own time and they tend to have more free time, let's say on a weekend. But definitely having at least one weekend. And what we've seen through COVID when we've moved to the online environment is definitely 1 week has seemed to work really well. And looky there, hey, shout out to our good buddy Tim Stewart, fellow auctioneer out of Canby, Oregon. Tim Stewart, Stewart Realty Group, specializing in real estate auctions and benefits, doing it all. He's quite the auctioneer. I think he's got a big sale coming up this I think Friday, actually, doing a sale down in the Salem area and at Capitol Auction House, selling some security deposit boxes that have been abandoned or something. So good luck to you with that, Tim. I think I actually worked that event with you a year ago or two pre-COVID, and it was a fun sale. So anyhow, thanks for tuning in, Tim. Appreciate all your feedback. And Tim's been a wonderful influence on my mindset with this, because Tim does a lot of online auctions and has done many for many years. And so, I think when we think about the best practices, we really want to take advantage of those. So, as we think about that, one of the things that comes up pretty regularly is, what are our starting bids and what are our increments? In the traditional silent auction, we used to talk about having a starting bid at 35 to 40% of the fair market value of an item. So for example, if it was a $100 valued item, we might have said start that at $35 or $40. That would have been the opening bid for that item. And then what we would say is, calculate out increments of roughly about 10% of the value. So on that $100 items, that would be $10 increments up into, let's say, 135, 150%. Make that your last line on your bid sheet. And that would be, in essence, your buy it now, because there was no room for anybody to bid after. You might even use the phrase buy it now for, $150, right? And, with those 10% increments, that pretty much matched the number of lines you had and away you went. Okay. And so that was fine. Well, today I would tell you a totally different attitude and a totally different philosophy and methodology there. And I'm stealing this from our auctioneers that we talk to around the country on the other side of the business, right? And that is that they start everything at $1 or even at $0 or $5 or $10. The most I heard from any of them was $10 starting bids, right? And I was like, hang on a second. I was talking to Barrett Bray. Barrett's a international auction champion out of Edmond, Oklahoma. And Barrett does a lot of online auctions. And he was sharing with me that he started a house for $1. It was a 10-day window for bidding, and the deal closed 10 days later for over $1 million, right? It's, so as I said earlier today, it's not, doesn't matter where you start the bidding, it's where you finish, right? And it's a perfect example of people getting in, bidding early because they think this is an unbelievable opportunity. And as soon as they bid, they start to have that pride of ownership. They can picture themselves living in that home. They can picture themselves what they could do with that home or that trip or whatever it is you've got for sale. And they'll continue to bid. I use an example. I don't know how many times prior to being an auctioneer that I would go to events, auction events, benefit auctions, and I had no idea what was available, right? And I would go to the event, I would see the catalog, and wow, this looks like a wonderful trip to Italy or a wonderful trip to Bali or a wonderful trip to Mexico or wherever it was, wine country, it doesn't matter. But I didn't leave home that night planning on spending, $4,000 or $5,000, right? And when the auctioneer started it off, right, because they had a window that they needed to do the auction in, they started the bidding at $1,000. I was like, hey, I didn't come here to do that, right? But if they had started the bidding at $100. I would have said, I'm in for 100. Count me, fly my card, right? Um, and then I could, keep going. I'd probably bid over 1,000. I may not go all the way and win it at 4,000, but I would definitely keep bidding up until some comfort level. But when it started, in those $1,000 range or whatever, it just I don't know. I think it eliminates a lot of people right from the get-go. So as we look at this online auction industry and incorporating online auctions into our fundraising events, I think it's an incredible opportunity. Start that bidding, start that amount really low, that initial bid amount, that opening bid level. I recommend $10. Seems like a reasonable number to me. I think it's something most people can participate. And as soon as they start bidding, away they go, right? And if you think you can bid on a package that's worth $400 or $500, not to mention a trip, maybe it's worth several $1,000s, and you can bid 10, 20, 50, $100 on that, you're feeling pretty good about it. You've got that pride of ownership and that fear of loss, and you'll keep bidding. And I think one of the things that's key to remember in this environment is that as a fundraising auction, every single bid raises money for your organization. It's not just about the winning bid. It's about every bid. The other thing that sticks out and what I've seen as we have executed this philosophy now for over a year. We started with our first event probably in November a year ago, 2020, applying this methodology, and it was crazy. We saw triple the number of bidders register for this event than had attended their in-person event. And I don't know that you can give 100% of the credit to the bidding full methodology, but I think you can give quite a bit of it to it. That people got in, we promoted, hey, opening bids at $10, things of that nature. That got people's attention, and people wanted to see what they could buy, quote, for $10, right? And the reality is that we achieved very high sale percentage to fair market value, in many cases going over fair market value, in most cases on an average right around 100% of fair market value, which falls in line with the auction methodology, which is, the true fair market value is what somebody's willing to pay for it. But when we can sell it at auction for what someone might, find a fair market value to be for that item, then that's a pretty good deal. And to put it in perspective, we were taught in our benefit auction specialist class by the National Auctioneer Association, we were all taught that a average silent auction did somewhere around 50 to 60% of fair market value in final closing prices, and that a really good silent auction did about 70% of fair market value. So if we're achieving numbers closer to 100% in our online fundraising auctions, then I think something's right about this pricing strategy. And so I'm going to encourage you to start low, start as low as you can. Now, if you've got some consignment items, or you've got a donor who's provided you with an item and they're really sensitive, they don't trust that the audience is going to bid that up, then I would present that if they start at a higher price, they may not get any bids. What makes somebody think that somebody's going to bid at 50% of fair market value for something versus starting it lower and getting it up higher? I don't buy that, but that's okay. If you've got a few items that you have to start above that number, that's okay. We've done that, and for some of our clients, and it's still been successful. And it's but I think what draws attention to a fundraising auction is when you can say, hey, bidding starts at $10 on most items, and away we go, right? And you promote that out. People are interested. People, it's amazing to watch. And because many of these clients, I'm helping them with their auction software platform, in many cases Octria, I'm watching that bidding all the way through. And it's amazing to watch those bids on the front end jump up really fast, and the volume of bids that we have when we open it up at those types of numbers. It's pretty amazing. So the next question is what increments do you use when you start something at $10, right? You got a $500 package and you started it at $10. I tend to not go with necessarily a percentage of fair market value. I think of it more as a percentage of the current bid price. Okay. And so in most cases, I use a graduated scale. I will recommend that we start the bidding. If we started at $10, I'll say do $10 increments, right? And then when it gets to $100, then kick them to $25 increments. When it gets to 500, I tend to kick it to $50 increments. When the bidding gets to 1,000, I'll kick it to $100 increments. When we get to 2,500, I'll tend to kick it to 250 increments. Now, that is 10% of the current bid level, right? Not the fair market value. Now, if I have a package, let's say that is valued at $150 and we started it at $10 and the bidding got to 100, I may just leave that one alone and let it stay at $10 because I don't feel like, somebody's going to bid. If we kick that to 25, then they're going to bid 125, 150, and then 175. I tend to find it easier and better to, in that situation, I will just leave it alone and let it stay at the $10 increments. And in some clients, we have items that are less than $100. I might make those $5 increments. I might start them at 10 and then do $5 increments for a, basket. I don't know what it might be, but, and I do this with gift cards too, folks. I mean, if someone has a dinner gift card, it's $100 dinner gift card. We'll start it at $10 and do it on $10 increments. I am shocked as I review the results of our auctions over the last year. That we've been applying this format. I am shocked at how many times I see gift cards sell at over 100% of value. Whether it's to a local restaurant, $100 gift card to a nice restaurant might sell for $125, $150. It's pretty powerful stuff. So I'm going to encourage you, start those increments low, or those starting bids low, and keep your increments managed. Do it on a scale. Go back in and adjust your bid increments throughout the sale. The other thing that I'm going to strongly encourage you to do, and this is a big difference, really big difference from our traditional silent auctions, is that we're not only time-based, right? So in the past, we closed our silent auctions at a certain time to accommodate the dinner, to accommodate the agenda. We said, hey, it's 7:00, we're closing. I don't know how many times I've stood in a room full of attendees and count down, we're closing this section in 5, 4, 3, and put your pens down, right? And there's always two guests that are fighting over, signing up for the beach basket or something, right? And trying, or some, big person is standing in front of a bid sheet, pretending they're having a conversation so nobody can get to that bid sheet. It's funny, we'd call that sniping, by the way, is when, people try to avoid others being able to bid. And the online auction industry, has had to deal with that, and they have tools, anti-sniping tools that are built into their software. And some of the benefit auction softwares have it also. They have different names for it. Maybe they call it a bid extension. Maybe they call it anti-sniping. Maybe they, whatever the different names are. But what happens is you set a closing time. We call that a soft close. You set a time, let's say it's 7:00 on whatever night. And when any bids that an individual package or a lot, what we call it in the industry, anytime a lot receives a bid within a certain amount of time, let's say 5 minutes, that it will within 5 minutes of the closing time, then it will extend that closing time another 5 minutes to allow whoever just got outbid or any other bidders to place a final bid. Now, every time it gets a bid within the last 5 minutes prior to that closing time, once it starts moving, then it will extend it another 5 minutes. In the online auction industry, they tend to make those windows really tight, maybe 2 minutes and 2 minutes. And my mindset is that I think people who who follow online auctions in personal property, collectibles, things of that nature, they're aware of the time and they're sitting at their computers, they're sitting on their bidding app at that time. And so 2 minutes is enough time. I think for us in the nonprofit world doing, benefit auctions, that a lot of times people place bids and then they don't think about it, right? Um, and I think if you can give them, a 5 minute window, because the software will send them a text, it'll send them an email, let them know they're outbid. Um, then they have enough time to go in, with an additional 5 minutes. I feel like, hey, you know, uh, obviously you may not want to be interrupted. At the same time, I think, our audience in the online benefit business, 5 minutes is a good time, right? And so, I would recommend a 5 minute, bid extension or anti-sniping window on both sides, 5 minutes before the closing time, and then it extends 5 minutes after. So that's really crucial, I think. And the fact that people get, an automatic notification they've been outbid, I think is incredibly powerful. Think about those, again, those paper bid sheets where folks, you didn't know if you got outbid or not. You're racing around the room. It's amazing we raised the money we raised, right? And but it also reinforces to me why people were, the tendency prior to COVID starting. A lot of people I was hearing a lot in the industry talking about, the value of silent auctions and whether they were going to continue them, because they tended to be a lot of work to procure the items and display the items and, all these things. And then the paper bid sheets and on and on and on. And they traditionally, if you think about the three key components of a gala event, which would be your silent auction, your live auction, and your paddle raise or your special appeal, the silent auction tended to do the least amount of money, but also tended to be probably the highest labor intensive element. It's what people spent a lot of time setting up their parties that day. It was moving all the silent auction packages over and making sure the bid sheets matched up, and then displaying them, and then having volunteers to close and to input, and all the different things. I think that online bidding is one of the things that we learned more about, that was a benefit that came out of COVID in that environment, that we should continue for the foreseeable future, whether we go back to gathering events or not. I think the online bidding component is something that we should definitely, instill in just virtually every one of our events. I can't imagine that we wouldn't want to do it. Quite honestly, unless a group just didn't have any items to sell. I think that, with the automation, as we've shown on this program in the last, X number of weeks, whether it's an online solicitation form, whether it's the online catalog, and how much easier that is, not having to print bid sheets, on and on and on and on and on. And just can't say enough for I think the value of having an online auction with your fundraising auction. It just, it's something that I think we learned and we're fine tuning through COVID, but it's definitely something that'll continue forever and ever. And one of the benefits is that people don't have to buy a ticket to participate, right? So you've lowered that barrier to entry, and for many of our nonprofit clients that are ultra sensitive to inclusivity and some of the buzzwords that are out there in our society today, the online auction really is a wonderful entry point. And when you combine that with low starting bids, right? There's no barriers to people who could get in and bid $10. If all you need is an internet connection and the confidence to be able to bid $10 or $20 or $50, right? It's a nice tool to use, and should definitely be in everyone's arsenal, or another arrow in the quiver, if you will, of a successful fundraising event would be the online auction component. So, folks, that's pretty much what I had today. to talk about and to share with you. I appreciate the folks that are tuning in through Facebook and Twitch. We broadcast through multiple formats. We actually broadcast Fundraising BIDness Talk through our G Events Facebook page, our personal Facebook page, our YouTube account, our Twitter account, and also on Twitch for all our gamer fans out there. Anyhow, I want to remind everybody, hey, all of our shows, all 43 of them after today, are available for you to check out. And all you have to do is go to fundraisingbidnesstalk.com and you can watch any episode. Use them as a reference library, folks. I mean, I talk about a lot of things that have been pretty powerful this year, and a lot of successes that we've shared with people. And we encourage you, go back, look at that showcase or that channel, and you can pick them out. They've always got a caption as to the types of things I'm talking about on there, and check it out. And if you want to watch us live every Wednesday right here, Fundraising BIDness Talk, we are always live noon on the Pacific Standard Time. And also, hey, don't hesitate. If you've got a question, you want to have a little one-on-one time with myself and talk about your event and how we can help you make your event better. Whether you're in the area or not, we're always available to chat. And, at the end of the day, we like to see all boats rise. So we want to share what we know, and happy to give you some insight and make your event successful for you. So don't hesitate, gevents.llc.com. Right on there, there's a Calendly widget. You can schedule a personal consultation with myself, and would love to visit with you. It'll automatically send you a Zoom, and the wonderful world of technology. So anyhow, really appreciate you tuning in today. Hope you have a wonderful holiday season, and we'll enjoy some turkey and whatever works for you. We're going to have a great holiday season, great Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody, and we'll catch you next Wednesday. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.